Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. This particular episode is meant to be listened to after the one on Unequally Yoked. So it's really important that you listen to that one first in order to get the full picture of Deetergate. Deetergate tipped Chris Watts over the edge. In the same way that Nutgate tipped Shanann over the edge in a way, Deetergate tipped Chris Watts over the edge. Nutgate happened on July 9th. Deetergate followed just 5 short days later on July 14th. Watts was caught off guard by Nutgate and was still sort of finding his mojo in how to deal with Nutgate or respond to it when Deetergate happened. On July 14th he was faced with another emotional emergency, but one that was sort of right in front of him and right with him. And this distracted him from his wife's crisis with his parents in North Carolina. First things first, what was Deetergate? And why Deetergate? Why the name? Why call it Deetergate? So Deetergate was an emotional conflagration that erupted between Watts and his mistress on July 14th when Nicole Kessinger visited 2825 Saratoga Trail for a second time. We know from various sources that Nicole was at the Watts home on the 14th, including from Watts and Kessinger respectively. If you want more details on Nutgate and on Deetergate, especially in terms of those dates, you're encouraged to go to Crime Rocket 2 and visit hashtag number 6 under the drop down menu of the Watts case. Hashtag number 6 deals with July 9th, which is Nutgate, and the heading reads, and it's a quote from Shanann, "My heart is still racing 30 minutes later and tears of anger," end quote. Hashtag 11 deals with July 14th. Basically, what all of those were, all of those hashtags, numbered hashtags, what they involved were, I wanted to do a day-by-day review of the last 6 weeks or so of Shanann's life, and so essentially just going through the phone data review chronologically, but exactly 1 year later. And when one did it that way and you were moving forward in time, one got a really strange sense of impending doom and inevitability, but also context. So that kind of chronological exercise was actually quite fascinating to go through. We tend to, in true crime, we tend to review things through the rear view mirror backwards, but we don't always sort of go with the pace of the actual narrative, and that certainly opens up a lot of insights. Coming back to Deetergate, when Watts was asked about whether Kessinger and him ever fought, this was in February 18th, during the second confession. He said that they never fought, but he had to calm Kessinger down a few times. And then he mentioned that Kessinger got upset when she realized she would always be the other person, and he would always put his wife first. And that's a really big revelation. And to us, again, it just seems like, obviously she might feel that way, but this really played in a big way into the dynamics. Um, I do want to do a separate post on that, on Kissinger wanting to be put first, just because just saying that, again, you might think that you appreciate the gravity of it, but you don't. You've got to really drill into it to get the full scale of it. Interestingly, in that second confession, Watts refers to the first incident where Kissinger realized he put his wife first, and it was when he left her house on July 4th. So at the time, he told Kissinger, just because he had to leave didn't mean she needed to take a step back. He was basically saying, I've got to sort this out, but you're not second, kind of thing. But Kissinger wasn't convinced. She wasn't very happy with that, and it wasn't a very good day. What is really interesting with this little argument that they had. So they never argued, but the one time that they did argue was when she went to his house, and she went to his house on July 4th. But the interesting thing is, he says here, the first incident where Kissinger realized that he put his wife first was when he left her house on July 4th. But that was also the same day that she went to his house. So there was an incident that day. It was the first incident. And guess when the second incident was? The second time that she visited him at his home. So to be kind of obvious, there were two arguments between Watts and Kissinger, and both of them happened when she went to his home. And I think on both occasions she confronted by this huge house and confronted by what was inside. I think Kissinger was actually convinced by the appearance of the house. The pictures on the walls and the sort of happy interior. I don't want to say decoration, but the interior presented the appearance of a certain thing, and Kissinger sort of accepted it. She thought, wow, you've got such a good life, you've got such a beautiful wife, you've got such beautiful children, why would you, everything's so perfect, why would you want me? And so each time she went to the house, she was faced with sort of a crisis. Why would you want me? And she felt very insecure and very inferior, and this led to like a big argument between them, where she needed to be convinced that he really wanted her and that he really wanted to put her first. But just think about that. On the one hand, you can understand Kissinger feeling that way, but on the other hand, Watts is now almost obligated to prove that he's putting her first. How can he do that? How can he be absolutely, how can he prove that? Now, I've actually quoted these visits to the house out of context. There's another one dealing with July 14th, and this is from the Discovery, and this is dealing with obviously the first confession scenario and everything that came out of the first data dump. It refers to Saturday, July 14th. This is the second time Nicole had been to Chris's home. She picked him up at his home, and they drove to Boulder, Colorado in her Toyota 4Runner. There they went to the Shelby Mustang Museum and so on. And interestingly, in this little snippet, there's no mention of an argument. So the impression one gets is that Nicole is giving the information that yes, that she was actually at his house on the 14th. She's acknowledging that, but she's not acknowledging what happened when she went to the house. Which brings us to the name. Why Deetergate? Well, if Nutgate was about nuts, Deetergate was about Deeter. And if you think Deetergate is a dumb name, well, it's meant to be. Just as Nutgate, I think, was kind of a dumb incident, going totally overboard about, if someone put um, ice cream on the counter. Deetergate was also going totally overboard about what somebody saw in someone's house. And all I'm saying is, in both cases, you had, let's call it hysteria, and that hysteria had serious consequences. It had people died. You can either say directly as a result or indirectly as a result. But if you can almost imagine, if there was no Nutgate and there was no Deetergate, would there have been pressure on Watts to do something drastic? If there hadn't been this sort of emotional um, arm twisting kind of going on. So we actually get the details about Deetergate from the third confession, from Watts' own version to Cheryl Cadle in Letters from Christopher. I'm not going to go through that. It is quite an interesting chapter. I think it's chapter 6 or something, dealing with the mistress. But all that's really sort of relevant to this episode is just to say that while she was in the house on the 14th, Deeter led her upstairs, and there she came across pictures of Bella, Celeste, and Shanann, and this sort of presented her with a bit of a existential crisis. It was like she suddenly confronted with Watts's family, confronted with his life, his wife, his children. She felt very wounded and uncertain, and she reacted. There was a lot of emotion and anger and whatever, and Kissinger then went to her car, and I think she sat in the car for quite a while, and Watts had to somehow soothe her and say things that would reassure her. But you can kind of imagine a situation where Kissinger is at the house for whatever reason, and Deeter is there, and he's his playful self. Maybe he's barking, maybe he's a little bit afraid of her. It's a stranger walking around, and he's sort of running around. These Dachshunds can be quite excitable, and one can also imagine, because Kissinger likes animals, she's got a dog of her own, Duke. She may have just sort of played with Deeter and ended up chasing him up the stairs. And when they got to this loft area, she found herself looking at photos of the Watts family on the wall. Now, on October 14th, I think this was that's today's date. On December 2018, the Daily Mail published a story about heartbreaking photos showing Chris Watts' wife and photos of him kissing her pregnant belly, and plaques highlighting important dates. So you have this headline. Now the relevance of it being 4th of December was the discovery, if you remember, was released on the 19th of November, which was on the sort of immediately after the sentencing. And then so it was basically, it took around about a week or so for some of the details of the body cam footage and all that to sort of filter through to the media and the journalists. So this is one thing that one of the journalists picked up on, was the photos of the family photos on the walls of the house. And despite this, Watts still did what he did. Despite these photos that were all over the home showing this sort of happy family, Watts still did what he did. So just to touch a little bit on the article, it talks about Shanann Watts filled her home with photos of herself and husband Chris, as well as images of their daughters. One photo showed Watts kissing the belly of his heavily pregnant wife Shanann, and another was a caricature of the couple and older daughter Bella. And then there was also a plaque of birth dates of each family member and the Watts' wedding date. Another photo looked to be from the engagement party, which was in the couple's bedroom, and this had messages from their friends. So you sort of had a picture in the center, and then it was surrounded by sort of messages from friends. And then in their bedroom there's also a stack of clothing for their baby boy Nico, which one wonders whether Kissinger saw that. In any event, whatever Kissinger did see, it distressed her to the point where she sort of realized, wow, this is reality. This guy's got a wife, he's got children. What future is there for me? Is this real? What is actually happening here? Am I not going to always be second? Is he just pretending to put me first? And I think what she often noticed was when Shanann called, he would jump, and that made her feel like she was sort of being second fiddle, and she didn't like that idea. So if you look at the Weld County DA evidence photos, I think these were actually part of the court file during sentencing. But in any event, if you look at these photos, you actually see, for example, the image where you have the officer taking a photo with his phone of a sort of a framed picture, which looks like it could be an engagement picture or wedding picture or something, probably engagement. And then there's another picture which is definitely in the loft bedroom, and it's basically the magazine article that sort of featured Shanann. And so I don't know whether Kissinger really thought about this, but that was a feature. It was for this publication, and I think it was all about having a restart or something like that. In any event, there's an image there which is of Watts and his wife, and each of them are holding both of the children, and sort of just in a basic way, it's kind of a green image, and then there's sort of blue, or sort of almost like a turquoise blue in it, and there you basically see Watts and his wife and children. And I'm sure it was this image above all that gave Kissinger sort of a sense of where does she fit in this picture. And no matter what the answer is, it couldn't be a very nothing was very reassuring about it. Even if Watts could give an answer, it was not a very reassuring scenario, right? And it wasn't. And then we see that after that they did continue seeing each other, and they did continue having happy moments, and we can see that Watts did find a way to reassure her, and I think Kissinger maybe found a way to keep his interest. But then when he was in North Carolina, that uncertainty continued. And what's interesting in the discovery as well is where his parents actually asked him whether he was having an affair, because he was texting the entire time he was visiting his family. So that's kind of a weird thing, is he wanted to go and see his parents so badly. That sort of came up in the phone data review, that even though they were together in North Carolina Watts and Shanann were texting each other about, trying to sort out how he was going to go and see her, how he was going to go and sorry, not see her, see his family. And it was kind of a big deal. He really wanted to go, whatever. And then when he did go, what did he do? He spent a lot of the time, according to his own family, texting someone. He was on his phone the whole time. And that just shows you that he was totally preoccupied with Kissinger, but she was also totally keeping him preoccupied, One thing that I think's really significant is if you go to page 714 of the Discovery documents, and this is dealing with August 12th at 13:51. So this is essentially early Sunday afternoon, and this is literally a couple of hours before the murders, right? And this is also less than a month after Deetergate. So Deetergate's this big incident where Kissinger feels very hurt and upset and unsure, and she doesn't know what's going on and whatever. And then a month later, that feeling is kind of back. It's the same sort of raw feeling of what about me? What's going to happen to me? His wife's returning later that night, or so they thought. And what's going to happen? Is this fairy tale going to continue? Is it not going to continue? Am I going to be second again? What's going to happen? And so, at 13:51, Nikki sends a text to her friend Charlotte. I just feel like I will always be second place. Like he's been there, done that. And that's something he also mentioned. So she's not only saying it to a friend of hers on this most crucial day. It's also something she'd said to him, and he'd taken to heart. He'd taken to heart that, wow, she's feeling like she's second. In other words, so what can I do to make sure she knows that she's not second? What can I do? And and we're going to deal with that aspect completely on its own, where Nicole Kissinger wanted to be first in Chris Watts' life. We know that was true, but what does it actually mean in practice? What was actually going on there? So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, share, leave a comment, and I hope you're going to take on this term Deetergate in the same way that we've taken on Nutgate. Deetergate refers to this, as I say, this crisis that Nicole went through, and I think that had a huge impact on Chris Watts and ultimately on Shanann. What do you guys think?